So I sat down to do this reading, and before I even pulled anything, I had this thought kind of out of nowhere about conversations, about how some conversations just happen easily without anyone planning them, and other conversations get carried around for a long time before they happen. Like a weight someone's holding, waiting for the right moment to set it down. I think that second kind is what's relevant here. There's a conversation that's been forming, not casually, not the kind of thing that comes up naturally over coffee without anyone thinking twice about it, the kind that's been rehearsed maybe more than once in someone's head, the kind that's been almost said a few times and then pulled back at the last second. That conversation is close, closer than it's been before. Let me sit with this for a bit because I want to understand it properly before I start describing it to you. Okay. The first thing I notice is that this isn't about uncertainty on their end. I want to clear that up right away because I think a lot of readings about the talk focus on whether the other person is going to say yes or commit or whatever the framing is. And that's not really what I'm picking up here. What I'm picking up is someone who already knows what they want to say. The content of the conversation isn't the question, the timing is. So if you've been wondering whether this person actually feels the way you hope they do, I think the answer is yes. And I think on some level you already know that. What's been missing isn't the feeling, it's the moment, the right moment, or what feels to them like the right moment for the feeling to become words. And I feel like that moment is forming now, not abstractly, concretely. Like there's something shifting in the conditions around this person that's making the conversation feel possible in a way it hasn't before. Give me a second, because I want to try to understand what's been holding it back until now. What I'm getting is that this person has a tendency to wait until they're sure. Not sure of their feelings. Sure of the feelings isn't usually the issue for someone like this. Sure of the timing. Sure that the moment won't be wasted. There's a kind of perfectionism around it, almost. Like they have an idea in their head of what this conversation should feel like, and they've been waiting for reality to match that idea before they let themselves start. And reality rarely matches the idea exactly. That's just how it goes. So what happens is the conversation keeps getting deferred, not because the feeling fades, but because the perfect moment never quite arrives. And so the imperfect moments keep getting passed over in favor of waiting for something that was never actually coming in the form they imagined. I think what's changing now is that they're starting to realize that the perfect moment isn't a thing that's going to announce itself. That if they keep waiting for it, they'll keep waiting indefinitely, and the feeling that's been sitting there, getting heavier, will just keep sitting there. There's a kind of fatigue that comes with that realization. Not exhaustion exactly, more like the fatigue of holding something for too long. Your arms get tired even if the thing itself hasn't gotten heavier. The tiredness is about duration, not weight. I think that's where they are, tired of holding it. And that tiredness is doing something useful, actually. It's lowering the bar, making good enough feel acceptable in a way it didn't before, making them more willing to just say it imperfectly rather than continue waiting for a version of the moment that doesn't exist. Has it felt like this person has been a little more present lately? A little more like they're working up to something, even if you couldn't say what? Tell me in the comments, because I feel like some of you have already noticed a shift in their energy, even if you weren't sure what to make of it. I want to talk about what this conversation is actually about because the talk can mean a lot of different things depending on where two people are. And I want to be specific rather than vague here. What I'm feeling isn't primarily about labels, although labels might come up. It's more fundamentally about acknowledgement, about this person wanting to say out loud something that's been true for a while but unspoken. Something like, this matters to me, you matter to me. I've been feeling this and I haven't been saying it, and I want to stop not saying it. That's the core of it. Everything else, what it means for the future, what changes practically, all of that is downstream of this more basic thing. The acknowledgement itself, the naming of something that's existed in an unnamed state for a while. And I think part of why this particular kind of conversation is so significant is that once something is named, it's different. It exists differently. Before it's named, both people can kind of move around it, can interpret it differently, can leave room for it to mean less than it does if that's more comfortable. Once it's named, that room disappears. It is what it is. And that's both the scary part and the part that actually moves things forward. This person is getting ready to remove that room, to stop letting the ambiguity do the work of protecting everyone from the real thing. Let me go a little deeper into what's been going on for them internally, because I think there's more here than just they're ready now. I keep getting this image of someone going back over the history of this connection in their mind, replaying moments, not in an anxious way, more like someone doing an inventory, checking their own memory against their own feelings, almost like double checking their work before submitting it. And what they keep finding every time they do this inventory is more evidence than they expected. Moments that at the time seemed small, a conversation that went a little longer than it needed to, a moment of eye contact that lingered, a piece of information they remembered about you that they probably shouldn't have remembered as easily as they did. All of these small things, when they add them up, paint a picture that's more consistent and more substantial than they think they've given themselves credit for. It's like they're discovering through this process of looking back that the feeling isn't new. It's not something that suddenly appeared. It's something that's been there for a while, showing up in small ways the entire time, and they're only now connecting all those small ways into one coherent picture. And once you see a pattern like that clearly, it's hard to unsee it. It's hard to keep pretending it's nothing or that you're imagining it once you can point to instance after instance and go, oh, that was this too, and that, and that. I think that's part of what's bringing them toward this conversation. Not a single dramatic realization, but an accumulation of small realizations that have started to feel undeniable. Now I want to talk about how this might actually unfold, because I think it's useful to have some sense of what to watch for, even if I can't give you an exact script of what they're going to say. What I'm not feeling is a big formal sit down, like we need to talk with capital letters and a serious tone that announces itself in advance. That's not the energy I'm getting. What I'm getting is something that starts more casually and then shifts, like a conversation that begins as something ordinary, maybe even something unrelated, and then there's a pause, a noticeable pause, the kind where you can tell someone is deciding whether to say something or let the moment pass. And I think this time they don't let it pass. What comes after that pause might not be eloquent. I want to lower expectations here a little, in a good way. I don't think this is going to sound like a speech. I think it's going to sound more like someone speaking carefully, maybe a little awkwardly, choosing words that aren't quite as polished as they'd like because the moment is more emotionally loaded than they prepared for. There might be a little stumbling, a little, I don't really know how to say this, but, and that imperfection, weirdly, is part of what's going to make it land because polished words can feel rehearsed, can feel like a performance. Words that come out a little rough, a little unsure, feel like the real thing, like someone actually working through something in real time rather than delivering a line. If you get this kind of moment, and I think you will, try to stay with it rather than immediately jumping in to fill the silence or smooth things over. Let them get through it. Let the imperfection exist. It's not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that something real is happening. Uh, I want to address something that I feel might be sitting with you, a kind of bracing, like even hearing all of this, there's a part of you that's preparing for it to not happen or to happen and then somehow not be what you hope. I understand that instinct. If you've been waiting for this for a while, waiting comes with its own kind of armor. You build up a tolerance for disappointment because it's safer than building up hope that might not be met. That's a reasonable thing to do. It's not a flaw, but I want to gently push back on it a little just for this reading because what I'm reading isn't ambiguous in the way that armor usually responds to. This isn't a maybe. This isn't a could go either way. What I'm feeling is someone who has already internally crossed the threshold. The decision has been made. What's left is the logistics of when and how, not whether. So if you've been protecting yourself from hoping for this, I think it's safe just this once to let some of that protection down. Not recklessly, just enough to actually let yourself feel what it would mean if this happened. Because I think it's going to happen, and I don't want you to miss the experience of it by being so braced for it not to that you can't fully receive it when it does. Have you been doing that? Holding back from hoping, just in case? Let me know in the comments because I think a lot of you have, and I think it's been more tiring than you've let yourselves notice. Let me talk about what this means for you specifically, because I don't want this reading to be only about them and their process. You're half of this too, and I think there's something important here about your role in how this unfolds. What I feel is that your response when this conversation happens matters more than you might think. Not because you need to perform a particular reaction, but because this person, having finally said the thing they've been holding, is going to be in a vulnerable position immediately afterward. They've just done something hard, and what happens in the seconds and minutes after they do it is going to shape how this whole thing settles. I don't think you need to have a perfect response prepared. In fact, I think a prepared response would feel wrong, would feel like you knew this was coming and had a speech ready, which might actually make them feel like the moment was less special than it was for them. What I think serves you best is just being present, really present, not immediately analyzing what it means or what happens next or whether you should say something equally significant back right away. Just being there with them in the moment, letting it land the way it's going to land. If you have feelings that match what they're expressing, and I think a lot of you do, those feelings will come through. You don't have to force them into the right words immediately. Sometimes the most honest response to someone being vulnerable is just matching that vulnerability, even imperfectly, even without a perfect script of your own. I want to come back to the idea of timing again, because I think it's worth exploring a little more. There's a question that sometimes comes up in readings like this, which is something like, well, if they feel this way, why now? Why not before? And I think the honest answer is that why now is almost always more about internal readiness than external circumstances. The circumstances were probably fine before, the feeling was probably there before. What's different now is that something in this person has shifted enough that the gap between feeling something and saying it has gotten smaller. And I think part of what's been driving that shift, weirdly, might be you. Not anything dramatic you did, just the accumulation of you being consistently yourself, reliable, present, not going anywhere, even during the waiting. There's something about someone's steady presence over time that gradually makes a person feel safer about being honest with them. Like, the longer this person has had you in their life, showing up the same way, being someone they can trust with the ordinary stuff, the safer it started to feel to also trust you with the bigger stuff. So, in a strange way, the waiting itself has been part of what's making this conversation possible now. Not waiting as something passive that just had to run its course, but waiting as something that's been quietly building trust the whole time, even when it didn't feel like progress. That's worth recognizing. The time hasn't been wasted. It's been doing something, even when it didn't look like it. There's one more thing I want to mention, and it's something that came through a little unexpectedly, so let me try to describe it as it arrived. I got this sense of relief. Not your relief, theirs. Like, underneath the nervousness of having this conversation, underneath whatever awkwardness might come with it, there's going to be this undercurrent of relief in them. The relief of finally not having to manage this anymore, of finally letting something be visible that's been kept carefully hidden. I think that relief is going to be visible too, in a way. Maybe they'll seem lighter afterward. Maybe something in how they carry themselves will be different in a way that's hard to pinpoint but easy to notice. Like watching someone put down something heavy they've been carrying for so long that you forgot they were carrying it at all, and suddenly they're standing up a little straighter. That's part of what's coming. Not just words, a kind of lightness that follows the words. And I think being part of that, being the person this lightness happens around, is going to be meaningful for you too, in a way that goes beyond just hearing what you've been hoping to hear. Okay, let me bring this together. What I feel overall is that this person has done the internal work. The feeling is solid. The decision has been made. What's left is mostly about timing, and the timing is shifting in a direction that makes the conversation more likely now than it's been before. The how might be imperfect, the words might not be polished, but the substance of it is real, and I don't think you're going to be left wondering what they meant. For you, I think the most useful thing is to stay present, not braced, not performing readiness, just present. Let yourself notice if you've been protecting against hope, and consider, just for now, letting a little of that protection down. And if you've been sensing something shifting lately, a change in how this person has been around you, some quality of building towards something, trust that it's not your imagination. It's exactly what it feels like. The conversation you've been waiting for is close, closer than it's been. And when it comes, I think it's going to be worth everything that came before it. Stay open. You're closer to this than you think.